right, we rolling?
You'll be in the second.
Yes.
I guess the people on Facebook cannot see our gigantic audience tonight that you brought in. But I was taught way back in my musical career that it doesn't matter if there's very few people in the audience, because you should take it as though you're at Carnegie Hall every time.
Oh.
So,
No pressure.
welcome to the Narberth Borough Council Candidates Forum. We have our 3 Democratic Party candidates for Borough Council, and they are going to introduce themselves to you and tell you a little bit about themselves and why they're running for council. And we'll start with Jean Durham.
Thank you. First of all, to the Civic Association for hosting this forum, and for those of you here to spend time out of your day to be engaged and interested. So 15 years ago, a few months after getting married, my husband and I moved here to Narberth, where we bought our first home. It was the last house on our list, and although the house was nice, what really sealed the deal for us was seeing the neighborhood. We saw families strolling through the sidewalks, children playing outside, neighbors chatting on the corner, and a downtown village that was humming with activity and had all the holiday lights up. Our children are 8 and 11 now officially Narbs, and I couldn't imagine them growing up anywhere else. Narberth is really a special place. It's a place where you see people of all ages, all abilities, all incomes, and increasingly all ethnicities. It's a place with a rich, long, and interesting history, one that's seen many changes over the last century. I value these qualities about Narberth, and I want to ensure that our streets are safe, clean, and livable, whereas children can walk or bike down to the park to meet their friends or go downtown to catch a movie, and our seniors can stay in the community where they've lived and be able to safely navigate our streets to go to the library, senior center, or post office. I believe in the value of an 8 to 80 model for our town, meaning that if our town is designed to be great for an 8-year-old or an 80-year-old, it will be better for all the people who live in it. I support the prioritization of active transportation and complete streets to meet the needs of all our road users. I support policies that ensure strong economic development and strong downtown. And I support investing in our aging infrastructure to meet the modern needs of our residents, business communities, and seniors. I've been an active volunteer in the community. I'm the vice president of the Narberth Cycling Club. I serve on the Parking Task Force, Parks and Recreation Board, Lower Merion Sustainability Committee. I'm helping with the Mainline Greenway and moving that forward. And I'll be serving on the Active Transportation Steering Committee. I applied for the vacant Borough Council seat in January, and I was really surprised to see that only one other resident had applied. I was appointed, and then now I serve on council. I'm on the Public Health and Safety Committee, and I'll serve on the Master Parks Plan Committee. I serve as the council liaison for the Parks and Rec Board and for the Station Square project. The council position is a very important one and requires careful thought, a willingness to connect, listen, and learn, and solve problems, and most of all, it requires real time and commitment. I've learned so much on the job already, from poring over all of the borough plans and documents, to listening to my neighbors and my fellow council members. I'm a Drexel grad. I have a Bachelor of Science in Design and Communications. I have 18 years of experience in design. I managed a team of designers as a director of design of a mid-sized company. I owned and operated a design business for 12 years. And as a designer, I have a knack for understanding goals and defining a collective vision to create a solution that's the right fit and meets the needs of the client. And I intend to bring that sensibility to my work on council. I think we're at the cusp of change in Narberth, and after many decades of a lack of investment in infrastructure, a lack of development, we're now seeing a lot of change at once. We've been awarded over $1 million in grant funding, acquired new land for a park, and have a master parks plan process starting soon, and we're seeing a lot of new construction on Haverford Avenue. We're also facing some challenges with the delay of the Narberth Avenue Bridge. That's affected our downtown businesses and the connectivity of our town. And we're in the middle of a hiring process for the borough manager. But with these changes and challenges comes the excitement of opportunity to engage our community, to envision what they want to see in Narberth. I hope to be a part of that process. It will be a great honor to be able to make a positive impact here in the community where we've raised our children, and I hope you'll support me in that endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Jan? Hold on. Okay. Should be on. Should be on.
Oh, okay, I thought there was a green light.
Should have the green light.
Is this working?
Is it? Hold it close.
Is this working? Okay. Thank you to the Civic Association for hosting this tonight. I am pleased to be here with Jean and Jim. I've learned a lot on the campaign trail here about the inner workings of Narberth, some of the challenges we face, and some that we will have to navigate on the horizon. Although I did know a little bit about Narberth because I am a member of the Planning Commission, and I give a great deal of time and energy and effort and care to the decisions and the deliberations that happen as a member of Planning Commission. Jim was on Planning Commission, I'm sure he'll tell you all about it, for about 10 years. He brings a lot of knowledge and experience as well. My particular strength, I think, and I'll just start with Planning Commission, is I am trained in architecture from undergraduate at State University of New York. I have a graduate degree in architecture from the University of Pennsylvania. I work full-time plus every day here in Center City for a firm that is committed to best practices for the environment. I learn every day what the state-of-the-art technology, building, systems, you name it, every day. And as you probably know from just listening to the news these days, the green energy market is on the upswing. We've got a lot happening, a lot of investment happening there, a lot of incentives on the table. And I look forward to taking advantage of those incentives as we navigate through the developments that are on the boards and on the horizon here for the borough. I have worked on a range of projects. Recently I led, as in I designed and led the project management and construction administration for a $30 million campus renovation project. It was we worked to improve the thermal efficiency and the aesthetic, basically, appearance of a lot of these buildings that had expired. They had exceeded their useful life. So again, it was an exercise and I worked with experts in the field, professionals who know the state of the art. I learned a great deal about what works and what doesn't. New products on the market, how to make them work to not only, ensure the water and air tightness of a building, but also its efficiency, energy efficiency. These are all things that we think about when we're, building buildings, but more so now that we have opportunities with the Inflation Reduction Act to improve the operating systems of our buildings as well. As a member of, and I'll just jump back to Planning Commission because these are all seamless in a way. On Planning Commission, I have worked very diligently since, I would say, July 2023 on drafting the green building ordinance for the borough. Some of what is involved in that includes 100% renewable energy for electricity by 2030, 100% renewable energy for heating and transportation by 2050, and other efforts on energy efficiency that really up the standard for what we are proposing. And a lot of that has been folded into discussions about developments downtown, how we can perhaps offer incentives to activate those goals for energy efficiency and clean energy. So keep your eyes peeled. You'll be hearing more about that, I'm sure, in later discussions tonight. Or eyes here in the borough and ears, later. Anyway, so that's my work. On Planning Commission, I work with Environmental Advisory Council. We have a very strong working relationship. We have had numerous discussions on possibilities for community solar here in the borough, and that is all also in the works. I'd be happy to talk more about that. I am a member of the Historical Architectural Review Board for the borough that also knits very closely with efforts to now, I don't want to confuse the goals here because, the green building ordinance is one, but HARB can very much help to support those goals in terms of reduce, reuse, recycle. We have a number of beautiful elements of buildings from, previous generations that are with us still today. They are, people like to say it's the fabric of our community. It defines a part of our character that we are familiar with, that we recognize, that we value. So bridging, among these three entities, the Historical Architecture Review Board, Planning Commission, and Environmental Advisory Council, I've really spread myself pretty thin, but now is really the time to do it. I mean, the incentives are here before us. We have new resources available to us that weren't available before, and that's really what I'm working toward. At the end of the day, when I'm exhausted and I say I can't do another day, I wake up and a new day is before us, and we're going to make this happen. So I'm committed to it, and I really am excited about it. I look forward to it. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Africa. I served in the environment sector. It is part of who I am and what defines me as a public servant. It's very, I take it, it's meaningful to me to be here. So I'm not going to let you down. I also served on a large-scale development project. It was a community initiative in India with funding from UNICEF and Suzlon Wind Energy Corporation. I worked with some very wonderful, enthusiastic designers there. So that was another project that I think really was transformative. It really was, another very defining moment. So again, this is a long thread of commitment to the environment and our communities at the local and global level.
Thank you, Jen. Jim?
Hello, everybody, and thank you to the Civic Association for hosting this forum and for hosting it every 2 years. It's a really valuable resource to bring together residents and people who aspire to public office. My name is Jim Spear. I'm a 23-year resident of Narberth. My wife Helene and I moved here in the year 2000, and we have raised 3 kids here, and we're so fortunate to have done so in a town we love, where everything is walkable, where your home rolls out into the street in a way, where you see your neighbors every day, where kids can be free-ranging, and where you can greet half a dozen people on your way into town. Among Narberth's strongest assets are our business district, which is the source of so many of our events and happenings, our sidewalks and transportation connectivity, which reduce the need for driving, our mix of housing types, which support a range of incomes, and our proximity to Philadelphia. But our strongest asset of all is our enduring spirit of volunteerism. Close to 100 people serve directly in the government, in elected positions, and in board and in advisory positions. Many more volunteer for all kinds of activities, such as gardening at the train station, raising vegetables for the food bank behind the library, planting trees, or participating in making many events run, such as Dickens Fest and 4th of July, and many more. I'm running for council because I truly believe in this town and its ability to thrive and adapt. The world is changing, society is changing, the climate is changing, and our challenge is to preserve the shape and spirit of our town while adapting to a changing world. We can do this by doubling down on pedestrian, bicycle, and disability accessibility, enhancing our business district to be even more welcoming as a built environment, and addressing car traffic volume and flow and intersection safety. We can be more inclusive of people with different backgrounds and abilities. We can be more welcoming of a variety of families and living arrangements. We can green our town by expanding open space, looking after our Indian Creek stream health, planting even more trees, and even greening our energy use. We can do all these things, and in fact, we must do all of these things, and we will. And I didn't write a conclusion for my introduction. My name again is Jim Spear. On to you, Rich.
Okay, thank you all. And thank you for running and agreeing to serve on council, which is the governing board of our town. So one of the things that we have talked about in government is transparency in government. So I would like to get your views on how transparent you think our borough government is now, and what you will do to make it even more transparent if that's an important issue for you. So why don't we go in reverse order since Jim has the microphone?
All right, great. Well, this is a good question. I believe in transparency through my work on the Civic Association. I've been involved in streaming the public meetings, and I am the prime person who keeps up the YouTube channel. And through all of that, you can view every word of every public meeting for the last 6, 7, 8 years on YouTube. So there's a tremendous amount of volume of information available. I've come to think of it as a sort of missing layer of a headline layer, of a news layer, since we don't have Cheryl Allison attending meetings anymore, who used to write articles for the Mainline Times. There's no coming up in Narberth news layer, and I think that level of awareness could be restored in a way through more public postings. I had this idea, I don't know if this is going to fly, but maybe we could have some kind of electronic news board downtown that is electronically live, that shows you the current issues, what's before council, both long-term and short-term, and what are the issues that are simmering. Because one thing about council business that I've come to learn is that it takes a long, long time, and things that might have started to be considered a year and a half ago are only now finding their steam and finding their traction and being considered as ordinances. So it would help, I think, the residents to be more aware of sort of a you are here approach to, what has been done on this issue so far, what decisions are left to come. And I think a model of that is the borough's webpage on 201 Sabine Ave, very thorough, which shows you all the steps that they've gone through to get to the point they have now, with a lot of backing documentation as links, easily viewable, and list of steps to come and decisions to come. So yes, I'm very interested in working on better communication with residents and having greater engagement with residents.
Jen?
Thank you. This is a very important part of what we do. As an architect, I can, dream up imaginative solutions to all kinds of, problems. But if I am not putting pencil to paper and showing what those ideas look like, how they perform, how much they cost, it will only remain an imaginative dream. So I think that I can speak specifically on this point for the borough here, that I agree with Jim. I think that the 201 Sabine webpage is very well done. It charts progress, it charts decisions, when decisions were made, but it doesn't go far enough to explain why decisions were made and to really enumerate the line items involved in those cost estimates. I think that in a fair world, we invite more than one cost estimator to look at an existing building and give us a number for demolition. But I don't want to dwell on that. I don't really think that's really what I'm getting at. I think that from the experience I have working on projects where there are a lot of dollars spent and a lot of supplies required and services required and equipment and you name it, it's good to have line items. It's good to have columns identifying what exactly is being assessed, because that is when you can really truly analyze and assess how quantitative values measure against qualitative values. And why I'm voicing this so strongly is because the environment, I think, sometimes falls into that category of a value, of a qualitative value. And so when you have to put $1 to the initial cost of an installation, it's going to lose on the chart because something else is not as costly. Therefore, it's more feasible by quantitative standards. So I think transparency in this very specific example of, coming up, just isn't off the top of my head, like a column for demolition, a column for partial demo, partial reno, and a column for environmental, what am I trying to say? Something you can do that would be in favor of the environment, a practice, okay, environmental practice. You could then break down the demo and reno into line items. And maybe, perhaps, you could keep an existing HVAC system, or maybe perhaps you could keep an existing elevator. And this is where it's so important that we bring design professionals, engineers, cost estimators, people who are experts in their field, so that they can inform those decisions about what we can keep and what we can throw away, instead of just a wholesale either demo or reno. And I'm telling you, if you look at it quantitatively, demo will win. But if you look at it qualitatively, decarbonization, all of those values embedded in that, and just, you know, green practices as a whole, I think that you'll find that the outcome will have greater integrity through transparency.
All right, Jane?
So I think we also have to delineate what the difference is between transparency and communication. I think in terms of transparency, the borough is, in my opinion, doing really well. A lot of it is thanks to Jim Spears' work with putting everything, recording everything, putting everything online, and the Civic Association. And that did not happen before, and I think that has gone a long way to make everything transparent. All the minutes are posted on the website, so if you do the work, you can find like all the information that you need. However, you do have to kind of dig, and I think that's the problem. And I think where the borough can improve is communication, and that honestly takes a lot of investment of time, resources, and possibly staffing to really do that job well. And I think we in Narberth are at a time of change. We have a lot of projects going on. After a long time of not much movement, we have a lot of moving balls to juggle, and in managing that change with the community, I think communication is going to be like an important key to help make that successful, to engage the public, to make sure they're informed, make sure they know what's going on, and making sure that their voices are heard. So I do think that we need to improve that. I think that can be done through an improved website, which has been happening, like website improvements have been happening. Structurally, I think the website has improved a lot. It's organized well. However, I think the homepage can be completely redesigned to be more functional. And then aesthetically, I think it needs a lot of work. But structurally, it's all there. And then in terms of social media and all of that, like we have to use all of the tools in the toolbox to reach out to the community, and that does take investment and time. And I think as council, we need to talk about whether that just lost connection.
Battery may have died.
Hello?
There you go.
Okay. We have to talk about whether that we can make that investment, and that's it.
Okay, and I understand. Do you need to go to the Parks and Rec meeting? Or are you going to be here? Okay. One of the things that is apparent to me that we really haven't discussed in our borough council forums is that council has become a deliberative body. And I wonder if you can talk about that and the kind of people skills that you have to help you navigate these really important issues that are going to require deliberation and probably are going to require years to resolve. We can start with you, Jane.
Yeah, so I do think communication within council is important, and also with the borough manager and staff. As we,
You know what?
I think it's.
I'm going to swap out the batteries.
I think discussion is always important. I'm new to government, so I'm still learning the process in terms of how and where that discussion takes place and how best to do that. our business and workshop meetings for council. We have limited time to cover all of the many things going on in the borough, and there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in terms of clarifying, researching, finding out the information. If we're not sure why a council member feels a certain way, we may talk to them and figure out their rationality. And so there's a lot of back and forth in that respect. So I do think deliberation is important.
Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, thank you. Deliberation is integral to a functional democracy. And I think that the members of council are extremely competent. I have listened in on a number of council meetings, and I'm thoroughly impressed with, just the level of professionalism and as I mentioned, competency. I think that anyone in public office is going to take a lot of heat for decisions made, but you can't, that's part of deliberation as well, is really trying to sift through the facts and the logic and rationale and numbers and values and come up with, a path forward. I think I bring some of those skills with me, professionalism, integrity, values that will help to feed the discussion in terms of my knowledge and experience, and I look forward to that.
Jim?
Thanks. I think one thing important to keep in mind about deliberations on council is that everything has to be done in public. The public debate has to be at an open meeting, at an advertised open meeting. And a lot of this takes place at the committee meetings, frankly, at the infrastructure meeting or at the finance meeting. You will see council members batting back and forth, policies and refining it before it even gets to an evening meeting of council where it's presented for wider comment there. I think both President Muterick and President Bush have been very good about giving everybody time going around the table to make their comments before it's sent back to a committee, maybe to get worked on some more. So I think that personal dynamic that council members have had has been very productive in the years that I have been watching, and it's something I feel I can participate in pretty well. I do know a lot of the council people who are sitting and who will be staying. I've gotten to know my running mates pretty well. We talk about a lot of things all the time, and I've learned a lot. I'm going to continue to learn a lot. And the other layer of that, of course, is the advice council members get from boards and commissions. Some of them are very high-level advice, such as from Planning Commission. There's a lot of professional expertise there. On environmental advisory, also very committed people, very knowledgeable people who bring council proposed ordinance and policy. And then the third leg of that stool, of course, is the residents. And back to communication is to make sure that residents are aware of what is happening, whether they're supportive or kind of so-so on what might be worked on in council. So I'm on board with closing that loop of advisory, of council and residents, and making sure we have fine oiled machine here.
I'd like to turn to some of the specific issues that you're going to be facing in the next couple of years. Let's talk about finances first. I just want to throw this out there. What is your view about the general financial health of this borough? Jim, we'll start with you.
So, from my understanding, it's very good at the moment, and that is greatly improved from a number of years ago when they were taking out loans to make payroll at one point. There have been development projects in Narberth that help that financial health, and will do so for the next few years. There are, I believe that the debt was recently refinanced, and we're not currently carrying a lot of debt. There was a tax raise in the form of an earned income tax that is new this year that affects not a majority, but a proportion of people like me who've never paid EIT before, but my wife and I are new EIT payers this year. I believe we're in good shape, from what I understand. There are some big ticket projects that council has taken on as either desirable projects, such as demolition of 201 Sabine, as much as that's going to cost, and its remediation into green space. Also the purchase and development of 3 Elmwood Ave as park space. There's going to be a park master planning process getting started this year and next year about examining all 3 parks, Sabine, Narberth Park, and the Elmwood Ave property, and that will entail upgrades and will entail improvements, and it will require expense. That's obviously we get to that when they come up. But I believe we're in pretty good shape.
Okay. Jen?
This is a question that, I can't answer in any quantifiable way. I know that and correct me if I'm wrong, the annual operating budget is around $5 million. And I have a couple of thoughts. One is, with all of these projects on the horizon, with creative financing such as the ground lease for 201 Sabine that they've associated with the option 4, which could result in partial demo, partial reno. I think the ground lease is an interesting concept for financing, while the borough would maintain ownership. The ground lease would allow a developer to come in and build and occupy that land. That's one interesting facet, I think, of thinking of how to finance. The financial health probably could always be better. I know my health could always be better. And I'm thinking also, a couple of projects came to mind over the past couple of years while I was working on Planning Commission. And I think there are a lot of grants available to boroughs like Narberth, communities like Narberth, that are interested in doing projects that are interesting, that are at the fore of the types of projects that are really making a difference in the kind of work that will help support the climate action plan, or just the environmental practices as a whole. So I think that I would encourage definitely more reaching out to tap some of those resources, so that we're not always looking to tax dollars to pay for projects that might not be favorable to all residents. I also think the EIT is a great idea. Lower Merion Township does not have an EIT, from what I understand, which is interesting. And as we see affordability on, do I say affordability on, affordability is not on the rise. As we see cost of living, inflation, escalating cost of houses on the up, I think that an earned income tax seems to make pretty good sense. There are other facets or elements of operation that I've listened to that I don't want to call out because I don't know enough about, but where I've thought to myself, is that really in scale with the cost of living today? I think a lot of things have just sort of stayed the same because, let's face it, Narberth is like that. Narberth doesn't want to pay too much to enjoy life. We like things the way they are. We like our boots on the ground, and we like to be out, among the people. So yeah, there's a lot to think about. But hey, if I'm listening to Jim here, things are better than they've been, but they can always be better.
Jean?
So speaking to what Jen mentioned about grants, so the borough did receive through our last borough manager, Samantha Bryant. She was able to get well over $1 million in grant funding for the borough. So that puts us in a very good place financially as well. In addition to the things that Jim had mentioned with the new developments, that also brings in additional revenue, and the EIT, what that does is it also diversifies our tax revenue, which mitigates some of the risk that we face, rather than relying completely 100% on property tax revenue. So I think those things have put us in a pretty good financial position, and so that gives us a lot of opportunity to move forward in ways that we haven't been able to move forward. Because a lot of times, I think we've had a capital improvement project or plan in the works or on paper for a long time, but nothing has been acted on for a long time. So I think now's the time to do it.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that is going to be the next question, is anticipating what's going to happen over your term. One of the things that's going to happen is that we're going to have to pay for the bridge. I mean, we're the last to pay, but it's still going to be substantial. How do you think that that's going to affect our finances here in Narberth?
Oh, me first?
Yeah.
So my understanding is that has been budgeted for, and that's been set aside. So we do have the funding for that. So in terms of how it's going to financially impact us, I think we've already accommodated for that cost.
Well, the capital improvement fund is not, I don't think it is earmarked for projects. It's a capital improvement project. It has to be a capital improvement to be funded. But the money, I don't think, unless I'm totally wrong, is restricted funds. I think it's unrestricted funds. Is that your understanding in the capital improvement budget?
I would have to clarify. I'm not really sure about the answer.
Okay. Jen? And I don't know is a perfectly good answer, because I'm asking you a tough question, because everybody here, and I'm looking at our young audience here, are planning on being here for the next 4 years. Yeah. So we have to think about these things.
Yeah. So, I'm going to do a little workaround here and say, how will we get reimbursed for the time we've waited for the bridge to complete? I mean, every person on the street is asking, when will they finish the bridge? We're looking at development at 230 Haverford. How can we truly give a full scope of analysis to vehicular flow of traffic if we don't know if we're ever going to get the bridge back?
Pretty difficult.
So that would be my sort of, I'll rest my case on the time it's taking.
Okay, well, the bridge will be rebuilt. I mean, but anybody who promises that it can get done in 2 or 3 years has not been following this issue, because there are so many things that come up that have sidelined this thing, and it's really maddening, the number of things. But as far as financing for it, that money is set aside. We're only on the hook for 5% of our own money to pay for the construction, design, and engineering of the bridge. But we do have to funnel the entire cost through the borough budget. So whoever the next borough manager is, or whoever the borough manager is at the time the bills come due, has to do a little juggling act to make sure that those bills get paid, and then we get reimbursed, and that there's enough in the bank account at the time. I don't envy that person, but hopefully they're skilled in municipal finance. But in the end, we should only be on the hook for 5% of it, which is already set aside. Other capital improvements recently were done on this building in terms of the heating and air conditioning, which has been so poor the last few years. If anybody's had an event in this building, you've noticed how incredibly hot it can get in here. And that's getting fixed this year, I understand, and that's going to help my video feed to not have all those fans blowing and those air conditioners roaring in the council room. The only one I can think of, again, in addition to those, is the Parks Master Planning, which of course is going to be a big capital expense once recommendations come through about what to do and how to improve our parks.
Do you think that we are going to have enough money through the earned income tax to fund those improvements?
I believe so. Well, again, these recommendations aren't even going to come around for at least another year and a half. We're only at the very beginning stages of park master planning. It involves a lot of people on the committee. It involves a consultant to see the process through. And they will produce a list of recommendations about what needs to be fixed. I mean, some of these things are quite obvious, like the bathrooms at the Narberth Park they need a lot of work. The park at Sabine Ave could be completely reconfigured. We could, which is very exciting to me, that we could have a park, a corner-to-corner park from Essex to that's Montgomery Ave, a park the entire way. That comes at a cost. Whether some of that cost is going to be mitigated by development on a slot in the back for which we can have some lease income. We don't know yet. We don't know what kind of proposals might come through to consider on that. But I'm of the opinion that even if we do not get any recompense for the expense, we should still go through that and invest in our park and expand the green space at Sabine Park. And that is going to be a big capital expense.
Jim?
I mean,
To recap,
okay.
we in addition to the bridge, we have plans for our green spaces and parks that are going to take money to finance, and we don't know how much. And my question is, do you think that the earned income tax will generate enough revenue, or are we going to have to do something else to raise the money for that?
I heard Jim say that it would, but with a sort of parenthetic maybe. I think Jean might have a little more insight on the capital management of the Parks Master Plan. With all of the green space, open space, which I know has been made in ordinance for the borough, I would just additionally, I support it, but I think it needs to be balanced with development that provides designated density to keep affordability in check, because I think that the financing, the relationship, and it's getting way beyond my experience and knowledge here, but when I work through it, earned income tax, property tax, these are revenue generating tax bases. Open space, green space, is not generating revenue. So I think we've got to strike a balance. I am 100% for the green space and the open space and all that. Multimodal, connectivity, I think it's fantastic. But how are we going to balance that with continued growth that continues to give us that type of funding we need to maintain those wonderful ideas for green space?
And that is going to be something that you three are going to have to address, I think, in the next 4 years of your term. Jan, you want to weigh in? Sure. I know this is a tough question.
We did receive 2 grants for the master parks planning process, but that is for planning only. And so in terms of planning, the borough only has to cover a small amount of the cost. When it comes to the implementation of that and the construction costs, I think we should aggressively pursue grant funding for that as well. And I think that can be done through whatever design firm that we work with. And yeah, we're going to have to start thinking about, we're going to be on the hook for some of the costs, I'm sure. So we do have to plan for that. And I think, like Jen said, and it's already happening, we see the development happening downtown. There's the development by the Rite Aid. So I do think those buildings will eventually bring in some additional revenue and that might not be for a couple of years, or a year or two, but also the construction of the master parks planning process, that probably will not happen until, the earliest it would happen would be 2025. So we do have some time to plan for that.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing about EIT?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So there is a little bit of an experimental nature to the EIT, to levying an EIT for the first time, because nobody really knows how much this is going to bring in, because nobody really knows how much everybody makes in this town. There's only an estimate right now that the EIT will bring in, I think, between $400,000 and $600,000. But it could be a lot less. It could be a lot more. I mean, I guess it's likely to be somewhere in the 4 to 6 range. But I think council did the right thing by lowering the initial proposal from 1% down to 0.5%. But we'll know a lot more at the end of this year of what that tax looks like, what kind of revenue looks like from this.
Now back to transparency.
Good. Right. Well, and that's why council is a deliberative body. It's not an edict, and these are difficult decisions. So let's talk about a couple of the projects. And I just generally want you to share your views with us and others about your views about the specific projects. We mentioned 201 Sabine, which is definitely a work in progress. But I'd like to hear your views about what you think is going to happen, what your ideal would be to see for that property.
Do you want me to start? 201 Sabine in particular? Well, the ideal is that we have infinite funds and we can do whatever we want. But we don't live in an ideal world. I am always in favor of more green space. The two most likely proposals on the table, both of them greatly increase green space by rolling the existing park down to Essex Ave. I think there is a need for community facilities in Narberth. We don't have a community center of any kind. Since churches have been going out of business recently, in the last 10 or 15 years, we've lost the original home for the food bank and for the community theater. If we again, speaking ideally, I think that would be a great space for a community center, that we should be able to house things like a senior center and a food bank and a community theater in the way that we used to. But these things come at a big expense, so I understand some of that is proposed in the RFP, the request for proposals. Some of those goals are listed in there, not all of them. If it was up to me, and if we had infinite funds, we'd have a corner-to-quarter park, and we'd have a community center. There's room for everything. It's a big lot. Again, we don't live in that ideal world.
It's going to take a rather large bake sale. Jen?
Okay, thank you. This is the question on everybody's mind. In December, per the website, in December of 2021, Council made the decision that demolition would be the most feasible option. Demolition of the existing buildings. Today, we have 2 of 5 options still under consideration. Option 1, demolition. Option 4 is partial reno, partial demo, with an RFP out, or not out yet, in draft form. Asking for proposals from design professionals, engineers, developers to imagine what that property could be. I think that this is a very fair move on Council's part to say, look, demo is only one option. But where we are today, just this past August, President Biden passed the Inflation Reduction Act, really just a momentous occasion. We have resources available to us today that were not available to us a year ago. We cannot be looking to pass decisions to inform our present solutions. We have to look at the resources, consider the resources that we have available to us, utilize them, optimize them, put them to work for our community, and take that forward. I think Sabine, in my own opinion, I do believe in the power of the professions to come together and really provide proposals that nobody's thought of before. I like the idea of having a community center so that this property can serve our community well. We have such a vibrant arts and cultural community here in Narberth. I think it would be fabulous to develop, a part of that property for that purpose. And again, I would just say that there is so much acreage there. I forgot what the acreage is, but
3.2.
3.2. again, designated density area for, again, keeping affordability in check, whether it's whether you call it senior living or affordable housing or whatever brand of development. I think what should be at its core is its density. We have viable structures there on that property that we can use, that we can salvage and keep some and not all, or, you know, these are questions for the design professionals to really consider. I do believe here in Narberth that we value the historic fabric of the community. A lot of people talk about the historic fabric. We have beautiful masonry structures. We have new buildings. We have new and old. And, you know, I don't think it's a question of keeping one and ridding of the other. I think it's a path forward really utilizes both and takes materials, thinks about materials very seriously.
It sounds like you are thinking in terms of a mixed usage for 201 Sabine. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, the way it's delineated on the plan at present shows a section of the property as green space, shows a section of the property to be developed as a building, but the way it's shown, it doesn't incorporate any of the existing structures into its, you know, very preliminary schematic diagram. So, again, that's part of where I feel the decision is hasty thus far. We haven't even given design professionals, people in the community, engineers, all those I've mentioned, an opportunity to look at the existing structures. I did visit the property with one of my fellow planning commissioners and a contractor I work with on historic restoration. We walked around, we looked, we thought, you know, yeah, of course. All of those line items they mentioned. We need a new roof. We need new HVAC. We need, you know, repointing, hazardous materials abatement, et cetera, et cetera. It would be short-sighted to allow those types of decisions to hinder the preservation of some of those existing structures. We have decarbonization to think about. I mean, that's a huge part of salvaging, is saying, this is viable, let's work with it. It might not be everything you dreamed of, but it's useful. And so I think that those are all things worth considering.
Jean?
So I think when we look at 201 Sabine, well, first of all, I encourage anyone who's listening to this to, if they want more background information, to go to that webpage on the website, because it has all of the information there. But basically, like they said, we're down to two options. And the one option is to figure out a way to keep the daycare in our community. And a lot of people in our community, as well as the daycare themselves, have expressed desire to stay here. And so I think it's a valuable asset to the community to have childcare. And I think that if it's possible to keep it in, we should look into the feasibility, and it's the responsible thing to do. So I do support that option still being on the table. And I also want to clarify that every option on the table greatly expands the green and open space in the area. I do think, speaking to what Jen said, I do think we should consider preserving some of the structures that are existing. I think from a sustainability perspective, I think it would be valuable to do so. And it's not completely clear to me why that's not financially viable. So if that could be looked into further, I would support that. But speaking to your question of what I would like to see as ideal there, I think it's a really wonderful opportunity to envision, and this is kind of an extension of the 8 to 80 concept, and I think it's an opportunity to really implement that there, to make that park and property very accessible to seniors. If we can get a senior center in there, if we can make a park that's more accessible to all ages, not just toddlers. And if we could get a community center in there as well, that would be an ideal. I would like to, as long as we're talking about ideals, I would like to see pickleball courts in there and a walking trail, native planting. I really think that moving the entrance to Essex Avenue would be a huge boon to the park because it would open up access for pedestrians and bicyclists because it's right there and it's visible. A lot of people who live in Narberth have still not seen Sabine Park because it's kind of hard to find. So I think there's lots of opportunities there to meet the needs of the community in a way that we haven't been able to do.
I'd like to turn to the economic development of downtown. And we have discussed it on the peripheries so far tonight. We know that the infrastructure is aging and that there is going to be change there. What do you think Borough Council's proper role should be in that? I don't want to call it revitalizing because that's unfair, but in implementing the changes that are going to have to occur in our business district on Haverford Avenue.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think we really have to be smart and strategic about development in our downtown. Part of that is looking at it from like a holistic view of a complete community. And what that means is if we can have a downtown area that's near where people can work, where people can live, where people can shop, and where people can ride the rail, use public transit, use bicycles, and walk safely. All of those things are going to be benefiting the downtown in terms of congestion, in terms of parking, in terms of the health of the businesses. Those are going to be beneficial to the downtown. So I think we need to think about all of those things. And when you talk about, a lot of people, I think they're concerned about the parking issue, and the parking is also, it's a complex issue. It's not just about adding parking. It's about making sure that the infrastructure is in place to support people being able to bike and walk safely to downtown, making it convenient, accessible, all of those things. And when you make a downtown where people can work and shop and live, you also reduce the amount of commuting that's done in the town. So, like, thinking about those things strategically will help. And also, council can start thinking proactively about policies to support those businesses. We already support the NBA financially and they have all of those great festivals like Dickens Fest and throughout the year, and they also provide some financial assistance to the businesses. So I think those are all different ways that we can support the businesses.
Jen?
Okay, thank you. I think the vitality of our business district is really central to the character of our community. our borough is really defined as a railway central, business district central, restaurants, parks. I mean, it's just so vibrant, has so much to offer. I think right now we're probably in a moment of a resilient economy and after the pandemic and, businesses struggled, and we're talking brick and mortar here. I don't think that downtown has, Amazon outlets that are keeping the lights on. This is a serious question. And so to try to put sort of a timestamp on where we are, we've got the 230 Haverford project in progress. I'm speculating, but it seems maybe slowing up the regeneration of some of those vacancies. I think that phasing construction will be very important to keeping the vitality of our downtown alive. I think we have new heights to reach in terms of what is available. We have, I know there's been some talk on council about, a retail, what are they called, like an agent, like someone who looks for, maybe like a manager, a recruiter. That's it. A retail recruiter to get businesses to come in. I mean, that's one possibility. Very expensive, but maybe organic developments. We have to really think about what can be done to revitalize isn't fair because I think things are not bad, but things could always be better, and so there is a lot of consideration to be had in terms of how to protect and how to help with the growth.
I take it that so far that this is on your radar.
Oh, yeah.
That this is I'm seeing the nods that may not be coming through online, because this is something that in the next 4 years surely is going to come before council. So it sounds to me like there's general consensus here, and I'll bring in Jim to see if this really is truly consensus, is that what happens downtown is in part, maybe even in whole, in Borough Council's lap. Is that right?
Well, in terms of the zoning and what gets allowed to be built, that's true. But I'd say it's largely and mostly in the hands of the property owners themselves, who have the desire to obviously build something for their own personal profit, but also it represents a real investment in our town, a real confidence that Narberth is going to grow and that they'll be able to lease those spaces that they're creating.
So it sounds like it's a partnership.
It's definitely a partnership, right? Yeah, the job of the zoning and the negotiation with what's allowed to be built is going to put limits on what the developer wants. But the same guy who wants to develop that 230 strip of Haverford has already built those two corners where the old Brickland spot was and where the old gas station was. Those are going to, from what I can see, they're going to turn out to be pretty good mixed-use developments with apartments up top, spaces underneath. Supposedly there are tenants lined up for those already. I would also point to the Elm Building at the corner of Forest and Windsor that opened a year or so ago. Prior to that building, there was no development downtown for about 40 years. It's been a long time since anything new has come into the downtown area. There's a lot of aging commercial infrastructure, if you will, that is not in good shape. And from what I understand, the people who have seen the shops beneath the old McShays and those the basements are just not in a good condition. The wiring and the plumbing is pretty ugly. The buildings, while they're old, they're not prizes. I believe it's in council's interest to let some development happen and to renew these commercial spots. We'll get more people living downtown, bring more life downtown. We also gain stormwater mitigation where we had none before. Every drop that used to fall in the downtown used to run straight down Haverford Ave and into the creek. Now there are buildings that capture stormwater runoff and hold it for infiltration. There's a long list of benefits that we get from commercial redevelopment. The trick is to put acceptable limits on them in terms of height and how they move the street.
Jen, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to, Jim mentioned something about the age of the buildings, and I just wanted to remind everyone that, we have a historic district ordinance here in Borough, and that those buildings do fall under that overlay. So any intervention with those buildings is going to have to go through the process of approval, et cetera, but it has been brought to our attention that, maybe by one of the former tenants, that maybe some of those buildings, some of those walls are not structurally sound. So, it's going to be a process to really uncover. And the longer this process takes, the longer the business is delayed. So I think, really requires a lot of, like Jean said, strategic thinking in terms of, how we can sort of isolate areas of work to keep other areas in operation, and look at it holistically that way.
Okay. I see that we're coming up on close to 8:30, and we're going to take a break at 8:30 so that we can turn over to audience questions and also stretch and do those good things. We've talked about properties on the north side. We haven't talked about 3 Elmwood Avenue, which is near and dear to me since I live on Elmwood Avenue. What is your thinking about the planning for the park?
3 Elmwood is prime location to get multimodal transportation working, up and running, get the bike lanes, pedestrian, get safer crosswalks, wider crosswalks, longer crossing signals, make it safe for our children who love to go over to Indian Creek right there at the corner and catch fish. I think that to my mind, would be prime to really establish connectivity with Lower Merion. We would have to work in collaboration with Lower Merion on, say, stormwater management issues and things of that nature. But, and it's even been floated, I think one of the questions we were given for the I'm gonna mess up the acronym, DCLM, the Democratic questionnaire for the endorsement was, do you support an intergovernmental committee that would connect conversations between Lower Merion and Narborough? And then I put a big, check yes, because stormwater management in particular is something that does not have a boundary.
It doesn't stop at Linwood Road.
It's not going to, yes. So, those types of coordinated efforts, I think, are going to be key to the success of developing 3 Elmwood.
All right, Jean, then Jim.
Yeah, so 3 Elmwood is going to be under the purview of the Master Parks planning process. So for all of those parks, I think we need to get community input, for one. I also think we need to work with the Lower Merion Conservancy to get their input on how to reduce the stormwater runoff into our streams, which leads to our drinking water sources. But yes, ideally, when the borough acquired that land, the idea was to use it for green and open space. So I think it's a great opportunity to really maximize that there. The creek, it will be the only public area where we have access to a creek. I think that would be great for our children. If we can naturalize that stream, I would love to see that. And lots of native plantings and shade trees and all of that. Like, I would love to see all of that. But again, we need to get community input and input from the stakeholders, like the Conservancy and organizations like the EAC and Shade Tree Commission.
Jim?
Definitely, oh, is this on?
I think so.
Hello? Oh. Definitely naturalizing the creek in the new 3 Elmwood property is desirable. And by that, I mean dechannelizing it, like removing the stone walls from the creek, allowing it to overflow naturally, you know, in a natural cycle. It's going to do wonders for stream health and for runoff. In terms of I would really love to see that existing culvert where the stream comes through under the railroad tracks. I would love to see that dual purpose as a walking path, so we could have something other than the Wynwood Ave tunnel to get through, you know, which is not sufficient for anybody, you know, pushing a stroller or
Are you saying
wheelchair.
that it's dangerous?
It's very dangerous.
Yes.
It's a very narrow sidewalk that only one person, very thin person, can walk on at one time, while not getting harassed by passing traffic. Yes, crossing to Lower Merion to Shortridge is a big priority. It's a big community interest in the Shortridge neighborhood as well. I think that could probably be more useful around the Woodside area where Wynwood Road makes a little bend and the visibility is poor. We could have a mid-block crossing there, maybe with a pedestrian refuge island or something like that. That's definitely going to take a lot of cooperation with Lower Merion to reimagine that corridor and how it could be more pedestrian friendly and bicycle friendly. But I think we could do it. I mean, the trend in Lower Merion, as evidenced further down Wynwood Road on the other side of Montgomery, is to reduce lanes down to one lane of traffic and provide a bicycle lane. Most of Wynwood on that side already is one lane, so I think it's going to fit in nicely with an overall approach, and to think about what that transportation corridor can be extended. What is that, north of Lancaster? I can't think. Are we north of Lancaster? No.
South.
We're south of Lancaster, sorry. And just to reimagine that whole Wynwood Ave road that comes out of Haverford Township and up towards Bowman as a continuous multimodal transportation and pedestrian route.
Okay. We're now almost at 8:30. It's 8:29 because I can tell analog time. We are going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll return with questions from our informed audience.
Thank you.
That's right.
Get Jim in there too. There we go. That looks good. Okay.
After watching everybody play with
You don't have to put, that's on.
Wow.
It's
Thank
wired.
you very much.
That's
I'm David Wicks from Forest Avenue, resident on Forest Avenue, and I'm very interested in all of the ideas for the open space, including Elmwood and Salem. I don't understand how we're going to be able to pay for the ongoing upkeep with what municipal employees cost, which I would speculate is about $100,000 a piece.
Well, for a borough manager.
No, or for an employee, I would imagine a municipal worker with benefits, I just in my head think that they're probably costing $100,000 each. And I wonder if these projects might become very expensive to maintain.
Okay, we'll turn it to our candidates. If you picked up the mic first, Jen.
Why not?
Yeah.
That is an interesting question in the way that you framed it, like municipal employees are to be considered expensive, I guess, or you know,
They are a cost.
they're a cost.
I
And
made up a cost, but I didn't say it was expensive.
an expense as we looked for growth and development and more buildings, etc. I was thinking that perhaps with growth and with new ideas and new ordinances, such as the Green Building Ordinance, perhaps there would be room for a coordinator, someone who doesn't just tend to one building or one task, or, you know, it's less delegated and it's more overarching and coordinated. And there are several benefits, I think, to a coordinator. You get, there's more knowledge of what's happening across sites. You can anticipate problems, you know, in a more coordinated way. I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but I was thinking about a sustainability coordinator. Now that we have a new green building ordinance that is under consideration, I think it's on the table at council. You know, would it make sense to have someone solely responsible for that so that we don't just keep adding more people with development, but rather we find people who are specialized in one or two areas and maybe sort of redistribute the types of task-oriented employees.
You mean redistributing their tasks rather than hiring new people?
I mean, maybe a combination of both, but because with this new development, I see we have new categories of development, like the green building or like the historic district ordinance. These are new ordinances. They have their own set of rules and regulations. Maybe we have a staff person who is solely responsible for maintenance associated with sustainability or historic preservation or something like that. I mean, this is just an idea, one potential way to address that.
I think what, and David of course can speak for himself, but I think that he's bringing up the issue of cost here, and that we are, even though Narberth has somewhat gentrified over the time that I've been here, which is more than 30 years now, amazingly enough. And while I do love it here, I know that we are of limited means. It's finite. And I think that's where you were going with that somewhat.
I think we'll be hiring more municipal workers to be able to keep up with the clean space, with the new spaces?
I think you bring up a really good question, and I think we have to be very thoughtful about how we develop that open space. Sorry, I don't mean to use the word develop, but to improve the open space so that it doesn't incur a too large of a cost to the borough that we cannot maintain it. So I think working with native plantings and shade trees and making spaces where there's room for passive recreation, I think all of those things can minimize the cost of maintenance. And we do have a public works crew that takes care of our parks right now. They do both Sabine Park and Narberth Park, but you're right, I mean, it may require... so we do have to plan for that, and thinking about Sabine as well, if we decide to do a community center, we have to think about the cost there as well in terms of perhaps a facilities manager. So all of these things have to be taken into account. And I think some of the costs can be balanced with some, for example, if we do a daycare at the 201 Sabine property, then that could offset some of the cost for the park improvements.
Thank you.
Jim, would you like to comment?
Sure. So yeah, I think it's very reasonable to ask that the park master planning process include estimated ongoing costs or increased costs. I'm certainly not an expert at what those might be, but I will say that the grounds crew that we do have does work at Narberth Park, and most of the same things will have to happen at Sabine Park. So in some sense, there's the costs and labor can be amortized over a larger area. They've already been at work at 3 Elmwood. They've cleared a lot of that brush. They took down a dead tree. They ground down the stump, and they reinforced the slope a bit with some quick grow grass and so I mean they have the capacity to rise to the occasion when new things come up. Yeah, maybe we'll have to add one or two more people, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe not. But yeah, these are very good question and reasonable question to not bite off more than we can chew. I think that's at the root of your question.
Or we'll have to pay for it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We definitely want to consider what the growth of government services might do to our financial outlook and always stay within our means.
Thank you.
Georgia?
Yeah, as you're talking, and I'm learning a lot hearing from the three of you, I've got lots of questions. I'll start with, actually I'm going to provide you with a bit of history. As you're talking about the bridge, I was remembering being in a meeting, I'm going to say somewhere like 2010, 2012, where it was announced, the word was that the bridge would be completed by 2014. So just to give you perspective, and here we are. I heard different things that piqued my interest. One was the notion of Narberth being a place where people of like different income levels of people can live. I also heard mention of senior housing. I know it's just a thought, but I don't see Narberth as a place where people of moderate income can live. Day by day, it's becoming more and more impossible for people with moderate income to live, certainly in a house, but even in an apartment, with the Elm having, what do they call them, efficiencies or studios, or maybe they have a couple of each, and they're close to $2,000 a month. So my income is not that much. Years ago I used to think someday I'll need to sell my house and maybe I can move into an apartment in Narberth, and now I realize that the way things have gone and the way that things have been allowed to go is that I I would have to move out of Narberth. I'm not sure where I would go, but my income wouldn't even pay rent, let alone food or clothing or anything. So I think that's really unfortunate, but that's the direction that we've taken. And from my perspective, we're making a lot of money for some developers. I think those buildings are very unfortunate. They are big boxes designed, talk about design, they're designed to pack in as many people as possible to make as much money as possible. There's a little tiny strip of green space, and it's sad. And obviously, nothing I can do about that. But I'm very interested in hearing what's being talked about with I think of it as the old Narberth School property, and I just think it's tragic that thus far, and it's wonderful to hear that maybe this can change, but thus far, there's been no attention paid to people like me who, older people, I'll be 75 in August, who would literally have to move out of Narberth to allow the people who want all these finer things to live here, the upscale stores and the expensive apartments. I mean, to me, that's just a damn shame, especially for someone like me who's been involved in the community for decades, moved in 1987, so I may have been here longer than anybody in this room, and that's where we've chosen to go somehow, or someone has chosen that. Not me, but someone has. And I'm interested in hearing what you each know about services to seniors. Let me preface this by saying that Narberth obviously is a wonderful place for kids. And I mean, my daughter's going to be 51, and she didn't get to grow up here. She was a little like preteen, I guess, when we first moved here. But it's a wonderful place with a plethora of things for children of every kind, everything from playground to special events to just being a safe place. I mean, I love it when I see people sort of down the end of my block playing in the street. That's how I grew up. You played in the street. If a car was coming, you yelled, car, C-A-R, and you got out of the street, you went back, So I love that there's lots of cool stuff for kids here. And I'm interested in what is provided for seniors. What are you aware of that's provided for seniors before we drive all of us out of the borough? What services are there now? What would you like to see? And Gina, I'm loving when you talk about a community center that could also be the senior center. The senior center, well, I'll let you tell me what you know about what's provided for seniors in Narberth. And so if each of you would just speak about what you're aware of, what you know about what is currently provided.
Okay,
Go for it, Jim.
Jim,
All right.
have the mic, so you get to go
That's
first.
there's a lot to answer there, but so you're right. We do not. Since there's no more location, the senior center used to be at the old Methodist church. Methodist church went out of business. Senior center was housed, New Horizons was housed here for a while.
And was told that it would move into 201 Sabine.
Into 201 Sabine.
Yeah, the old school, that's where it was supposed to go. I mean, it was promised that, and we were told that that's why an elevator was being put in. I can show you Cheryl Allison's articles.
No, I believe you.
Yeah.
It's nothing we can do about that now. But it would be great to have a senior center back in Narberth. I would definitely support the community center if the community center comes to pass in the RFP. Perhaps that's something that a senior center could tag on to. What is done for seniors now? That is, you're right, that is really tough. I mean, the new building at the Elm, the rents aren't quite high. It does cater to people who are downsizing and selling presumably expensive houses elsewhere in Penn Valley and in Wynwood. I know several people who have downsized and are in retirement or semi-retirement who moved into the Elm. They tend to be people with means.
Yeah.
Jen is a better person to talk about this, but it has been shown over and over again that when you increase the supply of apartments, it does keep rents down overall. Not at the new places, but overall, the supply of housing, when you increase the supply of housing, you control somewhat the price of the rent.
Can I just speak to that? Because
Yeah.
I just ran into someone on the street, which is one of the wonderful things about Margaret. And she was so upset. She's somebody I know, I haven't seen in years. She moved off of Essex Avenue a number of years ago, sold her house, and moved into, is it called Narberth Station Apartments? The older apartments across from the pub.
Right, they're not actually in Narberth, but yes.
Okay.
That's Lower Merion.
Yeah. Okay, at that point, yes, you're right. She was extremely upset because she had been living in those apartments, loved where she was, wanted to stay in Narberth. She's probably more or less around my age. And what they did was raise the rent by a couple $100 a month and then switch from, you know how when you rent an apartment, there's often like a couple things that are paid for and then you have to pay
Sure.
X. I forget, I haven't lived in an apartment in years. And she said, people are being forced out. She's having to move out of Narberth at a time when she absolutely does not want to be doing that. And when she talked to them about it, they said, well, it costs to live in Narberth. So these new buildings are making the rents and the cost to rent go way up to the point where some people are just going to have to leave the borough so that the people with means can move in. I mean, I was very upset to hear it because she was really upset.
Yeah, right.
So I hear that, and that's a theory, but interestingly enough, that's and they're doing the same thing across Wynwood on the big apartment, garden apartment complex, raising rent and charging.
One decision we've made here in Narberth is to keep heights at 3 stories and in places in 4 stories, whereas in other peer neighborhoods, like in Bala and Ardmore, they've gone up to 10, 12-story buildings. You know, here we've made the choice intentionally to keep development low. You know, there are 50 new apartments at the Elm, but it's not hundreds. You know, that could be one of the first things when I was on Planning Commission, one of the first votes we took, someone put on the table to allow 6-story buildings in Narberth. That's a choice we made. A lot of people on Planning Commission, including myself, voted against allowing 6-story buildings in Narberth. You know, you do have to decide at some point whether you want a small-scale community with a limited number of housing units, or build up and recoup the revenue that those large buildings produce. We're not going to be getting that in Narberth. We're keeping things low. Now, as far as Sabine goes, the RFP does include points for income qualified housing. If a developer can make that work, that's one avenue to supplying housing that is lower in cost. But what the reality we just have to face, I'm afraid, is that the value of the land beneath our houses has skyrocketed in the last 30 years. And that these developers have been finding it much more profitable to tear down our houses and build something, you know, a big mansion or something large. The historic preservation ordinance is going to severely clip that back. The last one you have seen is at the corner of Sabine and Dudley.
Yeah.
A very large, very high quality house, by the way, has been built where a previously relatively modest house once stood.
Yeah.
So now someone will need to spend close to $2 million for that house. You know?
Yep.
However, that kind of thing will stop. The developer will not be able to tear down a house under historic preservation for no reason. It will only be able to come down once it's severely past its use.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wasn't on top of that. Yeah.
Why don't I pass this on?
I think Georgette's question is what resources are there available to seniors?
I was
in
also
Narberth?
asking it, yeah.
And what resources would you like to see be available to
Yeah, and how
seniors?
familiar are you with the resources for seniors in the borough?
Yeah, I mean, I think that policies in place for seniors, I don't, off the top of my head, know what is in place at present. However,
When you say policies, can you just clarify what that means? Policies are in place
like
for
fixed
seniors?
income types of, at one time I did know a policy for fixed income mortgage. But at the moment it's really escaping me. But what I do know about, far better, is that can partially address what you're talking about, is Jim mentioned density. And I just want to just take a moment to talk about density. The equation between density and affordability is very clear. It's kind of like economics 101. The more you have, the less the cost.
It's not happening here.
It's not
quite the
happening
opposite.
here. And actually,
yeah.
to be honest, the historic district ordinance that Jim also was talking about that stops the tear downs is a challenging one, because it does stop tear downs and it prevents, the subdivision of the property into smaller units for rental, et cetera, et cetera. That is geared more toward the preservation of community character in terms of keeping the houses that were here, keeping single family tenants in place, those types of ideas that are really about the preserving our character here in the borough. But I do believe that it needs to be balanced with a more aggressive move toward density and affordability. Density meaning the 6-story building that Jim voted against, I would have voted for. I would have said Narberth is turning into an affluent suburban neighborhood. And I think that because we are built around public transportation, and that because we have all of the wonderful amenities here available to us, that we really shouldn't be. We are a community of people who share resources. Affluence brings with it privatization, more cars, more luxuries, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not against it. I'm not against, the development of nicer, not nicer, but larger, lower density, call it. Lower density development, I'm not against it. But I think we need to strike a balance, again, with higher density.
Jean?
So in terms of housing, I think ideally we would have wanted the development to happen more gradually than it has. What's happened is that there was no development in Narberth for 5 decades, and then all of a sudden we're seeing development. And what that also does is it kind of prices out a lot of people, because all those new developments, they're going to have a higher price tag. But if it was phased out, over the course of many decades, then the older apartments would be less expensive than the newer apartments, that kind of thing. I've also seen this issue come up in Lower Merion. I was following the Ardmore master planning process, and they had Ardmore downtown district overlay, and the issue of having affordable housing and senior housing came up, and they do have in their policy of developments of a certain size are required per their zoning to have a percentage dedicated to either moderate income or senior housing, something of that sort. Now they also work with a lot more higher density than Narberth does, so it's something to look into that we can do over here. And in terms of resources, I think we should do whatever we can do to support organizations like the Senior Center here. I think it's so important to support our seniors aging in place in the community where they lived all their lives. And in order to do that, we need to have all of the things that they need, which is a senior center, transportation that's accessible, where they can safely walk or drive, or basically have the alternatives available to them. And yeah.
And are you familiar with what the senior center does and all, and the history of the senior center?
New Horizons?
Yeah.
I know it's currently based here.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, we don't have to talk about that now, but there's a whole history of the borough being incredibly hostile to the senior center, and from the promise of it moving into the building at the old school, it did not get to do that. And this whole arrangement was supposed to be very, very temporary, like 6 months, a year. I guess it's been about 8 years, at least 9 years more. And this is obviously not, when the senior center, they're just coming back to having live things happening here because of COVID, and the director sits at a card table in the hallway. The person who's sort of like the receptionist who greets sits at a desk over kind of where you are, just behind you. I mean, it's just not suitable. It's one room for all the activities that they want to do. So I like hearing that there's talk, I'll be dead, but I like hearing there's talk of a senior center perhaps happening on that property. So.
Okay, Michael?
Hi, I want to thank you people for coming. I've lived in Narberth since '89. My wife and I owned the Narberth laundromat building for a number of years. We raised our family on Dudley Avenue. The boys left, the dogs left, and we bought the house next door and downsized. My son, with his family, moved around the corner on Windale. So we have roots here. The things that concern me, and I'm going to cut right to the point. I've seen this town. I've been a part of this town. I ran for mayor in '95. Speeding through this town is a problem, and I've sat with the former chief of police Gallagher. I've had officers on my porch. I drew up petitions from my street, and nobody seems to get it. I even mentioned speed bumps. If you go to Mount Airy, you go to Valley Green, you go to Gladwin, there are speed bumps. And all I hear is excuses. You can put them in with bolts. Whatever you need to do, they have. This is a problem, and like everything else in life, I don't want to wait for a calamity. My youngest son was hit when he was 8 on my street. So I don't want to wait for a calamity for anybody. It's getting denser in this town. There's more vehicular traffic. There's more pedestrian traffic. There's going to be more. And these people that are traversing the borough, the chief will tell you, Lower Merion I've spoken to, the people that get ticketed for speeding do not live in Lower Merion, and they don't live in Narberth. This is a problem. Now, I've heard you can't ticket them. You don't have to ticket them. Have a presence. I volunteered my driveway. When they speed in the morning, they go through stop signs. My grandson and all the other kids are on the corner with their parents. They have to yell at people because at North Essex and Dudley, they're running up to Montgomery and vice versa to get to Penn and Wynwood Road. This is the racetrack. And Sabine Avenue from Montgomery to Penn and Wynwood Road and vice versa at the end of the day. This is a major problem. Number 2, one of the reasons we sold the laundromat building is parking. Now, why would I outfit a building in downtown Narberth, which I've talked to fellow investors, I'm retired now, but I do other things on the side. Why would I invest to outfit a building, whatever you want to call it, restaurant, furniture store, whatever it is, art store, when people can't park? There is a walking community, but if you have to rely on that, as I did with the laundromat, people would double park, drop off their laundry, and then take off, go do shopping in Suburban Square or whatever, and come back. And eventually, it was modernization of machines, raise prices, or get out. And I chose the latter, because it's a fixed customer base. So all the money that we're investing, and people are investing for development, people are spending $1 million plus. You're right, the house on the corner of my street, $2 million, whatever it was. Now I'm spending $2 million. I want top of the line shopping. I want to go and have brunch somewhere. I want to be able to shop for a Nakashima table maybe. Whatever. No, I'm serious.
No, I knew not.
This is what you're attracting. And it's getting more and more because COVID has allowed people to work from home. My wife closed her office. She's a psychotherapist. She now sees everybody virtually. Maybe she sees 5 people in our basement. But this is the changing demographic of the borough. It's just the way it is. And one final thing, I didn't realize that we had Elmwood. We own that now, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So there's a vast open space that we can utilize. Sabine's around the corner. I'm for open space. But we need to think about getting a developer. Who's paying for this? We need to get a developer in here to partner with us, develop it, lease it. We need to generate revenue. And we can still enlarge the open space, but it's all about cost. Because people are going to say, who's paying for this?
Well, we are asking for that. Okay, let's have the traffic question first. And it was well posed. We have had parking study and traffic study. We have an issue here. What's Borough Council's role? What do you think we should do about this? Jean, you have the mic, so you get to go first.
So traffic safety is definitely an issue, and thanks for bringing that question up. And I think once the Narberth Avenue Bridge is functional again, I think we're going to see a lot more traffic as well. So we do have to address these issues, safety on the streets. There are things that we can do. Council has already worked with our traffic engineer to make some traffic calming improvements on Iona, because that has become a cut-through route for a lot of people. So in order to reduce the cut-through traffic there, they're reinstating a left turn sign there, and also actually, I don't want to say that they are doing it. This is what they're recommending. So, and they're also recommending curb extension bulb outs at the intersections and that slows down the traffic. And they're also recommending speed bumps along Iona. I think it's 2 between Windsor and Meeting House Lane. So there is a process for all of this. It requires a traffic study in order to legally put these devices in place. But we take it seriously.
Is there a committee of council that addresses the street and traffic issues?
So it's a Public Health and Safety Committee.
And that's within their purview?
Right. So if you have concerns, you should come to the Public
Can I
Health
say
and Safety
something?
Committee.
As a borough council member, there are committees and there are people to talk to, but quite honestly, all it takes is picking up the phone or walking over to the police and saying, you know what, guys and ladies, why don't you just, I can't tell you honestly the last time I saw a Narberth police car, they did it for a week or so, sitting on Dudley Avenue, okay? In the morning, and I'm up early, my wife and I are up early, from 6:30, we'll say till 9:30, it's the expressway. And then in the evening, from 4:30 to 6:30, it's the turnpike, because everybody's racing to get home. They want to get to Montgomery, or vice versa, they want to get to
That's
Penn.
consistent with the data that the traffic engineer collected as well.
Right.
There is.
It corroborates that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yes.
So all the police have to do, and it's not even pulling people over. I get that. But if you just have a presence and say the borough speed limit is 25, we're mindful of that. People just need to be notified that we're not going to tolerate it. And these people do not live in the borough. Is that important? Yeah, that is important, because they're using the borough at risk to the people that live here, the children that play here, the people that walk their dogs all day long. If they run out, my neighbors have 3 little lollipop girls, okay? And they ran out to a yard sale one day. I had to go in the house because they ran across the street, and it scared me so much. And it's going to take one incident, and then we're all going to say, oh my God, why didn't we? Well, we can. And it doesn't make sense to me. It really, nor anybody on my street, or anybody that you talk to that has children, or whatever, or we're walking. It's not good. So
I just want to note that there was a meeting for people to meet with the new police chief, and
yes, there was.
a small group of people came, and we got to talk with him and ask questions, and he seems like he's very receptive to hearing from anybody about anything that's police related. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I have a 7-year-old at home, and when he gets out on his bike,
Right.
I worry. So I understand and your concern. I think another angle on this is to think about when we talk about development, and there is an express need for more parking. More parking brings more cars. More cars brings more traffic. More traffic results in all these complicated
Correct.
problems. I think because, and I will go back to sort of the beginning here, in a sense, Narberth has a train station at its center. It is so valuable to the makeup of our community, to how quickly we move from one place to the next, how we plan our day. I think we need to really capitalize on having public transportation at our doorstep. I think when we talk about development, we cannot get carried away in the need, in the idea that more parking will bring more business. Maybe it will, but we have to think about it carefully. And perhaps, we have a public garage.
We have.
That's put somewhere outside of the small neighborhood streets.
But see, we have, to interrupt just because this has been ongoing for years, we have St. Margaret's parking lot. And I mentioned this years ago. It takes, all you need to do is walk up to these people, to the rectory or whatever. I mean, it takes just, a knock on the door to say, listen, would you consider leasing the parking lot at certain hours in the evening? We could have a shuttle, you know, like they have the trolley. If we want to invest, you can run people from the parking lot at night. If we have restaurants, or during the day, you cut back. The point is that we can work out creatively to help with insurance, whatever they need to utilize that parking space. There's the parking behind, what is it, the PNC Bank there on the corner. I mean, there's a parking lot there. Could we, you know, talk to them? Can we utilize that at night? I know there's liability issues, but they can all be worked out.
I mean, that is why I do think one of the virtues of the 201 Sabine proposed very preliminary, proposal for development says all vehicular traffic comes off of Montgomery and returns back to Montgomery. We're not bringing it into the community. We're keeping it out where the main thoroughfare is situated. So yes, I hear what you're saying. The other part of it is, and you may or may not be aware, there has been a lot of community activism about getting stop signs put in strategic places to stop traffic, slow it down, control it.
They have solar powered, I just saw it today, solar powered 25 mile per hour. They blink. So, you know, what's the cost of those? These are minuscule ways, not expensive, that, you know, or Narberth, you know, publicize the borough. Narberth is a safe community. We're a 25 mile per hour community. I mean, it just takes a little initiative. It's not a lot of expense, but if it's an intention that we have and that we share, it can be done. And it's for everybody's benefit, and it doesn't cost a lot of money.
And I'm not sure that more policing is the answer. I think we need more control.
Well, that's another issue. We don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
Well, we're not discussing the policing tonight. Well, Jim, we're running toward 9:30, and I want you to be able to respond to the traffic question, if you would like, and then I would like you to give some closing statements.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. No. Well, just quickly, I'm very pro speed bump. I'm very pro infrastructure solution on traffic, which I agree is the vast majority of it is cut through traffic. It's of no use to Narberth at all. They're not residents coming home.
They're not alien.
Yeah, they're not patronizing our businesses. Right. They're just like water. They're finding the fastest route through town to get from one major thoroughfare to the other. I agree with. I think we should examine how to make that a less attractive route, a slower route. Speed bumps are one thing. Narrowing the roadway is another. Perhaps re-examining, it's a can of worms, but re-examining which streets could be one way. Just make it less convenient. Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Make it less convenient to just
I'm not against people coming through the borough.
Yeah,
but if you're going to come through the borough,
slow down.
Rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
Slow down.
Yeah, and I think we have a limited resources on our police departments. They can't be there all the time. They can't be everywhere at one time.
I understand that.
Infrastructure solutions like speed bumps and narrowing roadways and one-ways.
Far more cost effective.
Absolutely. And more durable as a solution.
Okay, before you give your statements, I just want to check Zoom and make sure we don't have any questions in the chat. Okay, candidate respond by restating the question. Well, I think we've done a decent job, at least with the audience questions about traffic. Okay, it's time for closing statements, and Jim, you got the mic first.
Great.
Jim's in the middle, and Jean is...
Go back to my paper where I prepared a closing statement. But I want to thanks again to Rich and to the Civic Association for the event and for the opportunity for us to be here tonight. It's
I'm sorry, when is the primary election?
Primary election is coming Tuesday the 16th. That's next week. That's
And
5
where
days
do
from
people
now.
go to vote?
Wherever they live.
Most of you come right here to Narberth Borough Hall to vote. Those of you who live in my precinct, in Narberth 1, we vote at Narberth Presbyterian, which is the corner of Hamden and Windsor. But those of you who live there, you know already. Just go to one of those two places. They'll send you to the other if you're in the wrong one. So some of you know me from my time at Belmont Hills Elementary, where I was a longtime HSA volunteer, including term as president, and many other positions in school HSAs as my kids have aged through the system. Some of you know me from Narberth Havara, where I was also president. Some of you know me way back from Narberth Walks Together, which was an advocacy group which advocated for walkable high school choice in Narberth, which was a successful movement. And if you don't know me personally, maybe I've dug a hole for your tree, maybe I've leafleted your house for a Democratic candidate, maybe I've answered your question online about the zoning code, or maybe you've watched one of the hundreds of videos on YouTube that I've posted and kept on the Narberth Civic Association YouTube channel. I have served terms on Planning Commission, on Library Board, on Vacancy Board, which does nothing, by the way, and I'm presently on the Shade Tree Commission. And I believe in Narberth as a town where you can be the change that you want to see, where you can live your values by actively supporting them. Volunteers and community leaders are my favorite people, and I learn so much from them every day, and I'm honored to be up here and considered for this seat on council, and I'm fortunate to be running with these two fabulous people, and I'm so lucky they agreed to run with me. And I'm asking you to check out our website at narberthready.org, and we've been through the primary day is next Tuesday, election day is in November. Please come out and vote. We'll be there. We'll talk to you.
Thank you. Jen?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Rich. It's been, I've learned a lot tonight, and I always enjoy these questions because I'll walk home and I'll think to myself, oh, yeah, okay, that's a great question. I think I have a better answer now. But yeah, no, this has been fun. And, I moved here to Narberth 7 short years ago. And I've seen a lot of change. When I first got here, the first thing I did was I got on the Shade Tree Commission tree planting activity, twice a year, plant some trees. And I was very fortunate to be the first time put on a team with Bob Weisbord. Bob and I had so much to talk about, and he was such an amazing community person to know, so involved, cares so much, so deeply about this community. He was a huge influence on me when I had gone out for a walk and I saw what was happening at 198 Elmwood. We didn't get to talk about 198 Elmwood, the church there.
We did not.
But when I saw what was happening, I went and after I met him, I was rapped on his door, and I said, what is going on? And Bob said, you've got to get on Planning Commission. And so I've been on Planning Commission pretty much ever since, with the same very strong opinions about what's happening. I think that from then till now, a lot has changed, and looking forward, there is more change to come. I just want to sort of double back on really emphasizing that we have to look at the resources that are available to us today. It is a moment for optimistic thinking. I'm an optimist. I believe that what we have today will bring us a better tomorrow. And as long as we do it cautiously, we use transparency, we keep our professional integrity, and we deliberate to ensure that we are making this a democratic and and civil process. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean?
I just want to express my thanks to my fellow candidates and to you all here and to you, Rich, for this very important democratic process. I think it's very informative for all who listen, and it's also a great exercise for us. I think that the diversity of ideas that have come forward that's shared tonight really reflects the strength of our community and the passion we all share for making it even better. Throughout this forum, we've explored a lot of different ideas, a range of issues that impact our borough, such as communication, infrastructure, economic development, transportation, environmental sustainability. But now it's essential we take a moment to reflect not only on the challenges that we face, but the collective power we have as a community to overcome them. The strength of any council lies in our ability to foster collaboration with our community, to bring diverse voices to the table, and to find common ground for the greater good. So I come before you today as a candidate who believes that together we can work to build a future that really prioritizes the needs and aspirations of all the members of our community. I'm committed to working hard to find that common ground and to ensure everyone's voice is heard, and to advocate for policies that promote inclusivity for fairness and sustainability. I understand all of the challenges we face, whether it's the pressing need for a focus on our downtown, improving our infrastructure, or investing in communications. But the challenges are not insurmountable. There are opportunities for growth, innovation, and positive change. I'm ready to focus on these challenges head-on, armed with your trust and support. As your council representative, I believe that our community's strength lies in its people. So I look forward to seeking your input and involvement in the decision-making process. Thank you for being here tonight and for considering me, Jen, and Jim as your representatives on the council. So let's work together and strive towards a future that's brighter and more inclusive for all. And I ask for your vote, your trust, and your partnership as we embark on this journey together.
Thank you, Jean, Jen, and Jim. And to those of you,
More of us to applaud for you. Thank you so much. For all this time, answering all these questions.
we are so fortunate to have you as committed people and bright people to lead us through what is going to be, in my judgment, a very challenging 4 years. So thank you for your service in advance. We who live here truly appreciate it. Good night to all of you who attended. And if you missed anything, we're going to post a video that hopefully has decent sound. We'll see when it gets posted. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.